Hello, can you hear me? I am Nathan Hatch, and this is my stream. Today we're going to be talking about marijuana and cigarettes, nicotines, tobacco cigarettes, and vaping. So if you want to know about that, stick around. I give people about 10 minutes to trickle in, so hang out. And we'll get started shortly. Make sure the stream is working. Yes, it appears to be working. Getting started soon. Hello, Care. Hi, Jorg. You guys are right on time. I guess it's helpful when I actually like post ahead of time, huh? Instead of just showing up here. Neither of you are from the U.S. But wait, actually, though, you probably do have. Do you guys celebrate Halloween in Scotland and Norway, or not Norway? You're somewhere in the Scandinavian region. Today's Halloween, so happy Halloween today, everybody in the U.S. All Saints Day. Oh. Fun. I've actually never heard of that. Oh yeah, that sounds right. Scotland is so like haunted and old and neat. I love it. I love Halloween so much. My birthday was a month earlier this month, and so I always had a Halloween birthday growing up. And on top of that, I get to dress up and do costume. I mean, I don't now that I'm old, but like, you know, most of my life I would always do costumes and Halloween parties. Absolutely loved it so much. And but it's raining right now, yeah. Not here, not in Utah. It's dry and like something like 65 out. It's actually kind of nice out. All the leaves are falling though. Really nice, very lovely. How are you guys doing? Everything doing well? For anybody trickling in, I'm waiting for about 10 minutes for people to come in before we start. Yeah, thanks, Jorg. Yeah, that was a good one. Breathing is such a fundamental respiration, I should say, is such a fundamental aspect of human biology, and there's actually a lot of focus on it in a lot of hey fellas, there's actually a lot of focus on it in on like, you know, in forums and places like that, and but so a lot of people are familiar with it, but then mistaken to yeah. Fellas, yeah, we're gonna be someone else suggested doing marijuana. Hi, Bev. And yeah, so oh yeah, well, also speaking of respiration, now we're talking about smoking. I didn't actually recognize that connection. But yeah, so yeah, that respiration, cellular respiration, and gas exchange is so. Oh yeah, hi, yeah, Phallus, that was you. Yes, Phallus is the one that recommended these topics. The whole concept of respiration is just so integral into all of the metabolic problems that we have when we have health issues, because pretty much the entire fundamental purpose of our physiology is to perform oxidative respiration. So when you facilitate that, you get really good results in terms of your health. But then unfortunately also, there's lots of complicated factors like pathogens and things that cause disruption in those. So that in of itself is a very complex topic. But yeah. Anyway, okay. I'll be back in like. What time is it? Oh, wow. Actually, I've already passed like 7 minutes. I'll be back in a few minutes. And then we'll get started on the main stream. And also, you can feel free to. Well, actually, I won't get to questions yet, but you can ask them during. If you aren't familiar, if you're listening, you can ask questions anytime about what we're talking about, whatever. Usually, I get to questions unrelated to the main topic, though, at the end of it, the mainstream. So I'll be back in a sec. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, that was probably loud. All right. Well, hey, we'll get started. Welcome everybody who's here. We are going to be talking about marijuana and smoking stuff today and how to quit tobacco and nicotine if you wish to do that. But also, I mean, not even just quitting, just like why, for instance, like nicotine or tobacco might be addictive. It's not, but it can be. It seems to be to people. It's sort of a, like I talk about in a lot of my work, it's sort of an optical illusion. Not optical. It's sort of people see certain things and then make inferences. And very often that's not actually how biology works. So, and that's what I do. I clarify a lot of this stuff. But anyway, so yeah, let's talk about pot. First off, obviously, if you're familiar with my work, you know that I'm not anti pot or drug at all. But it's very helpful to know how they work so you can know what it does to your body and why we use these things and how they can be used effectively and safely and better anyway. And so on that, and a lot of too, I used to be a raging alcoholic and I went through recovery programs long time ago. I'm not technically sober. I discovered how to cure alcoholism and addiction, which I outline in my book, Fuck Portion Control. There's also articles on my website and YouTube videos on it here. And it's actually quite simple to understand if you don't know. It's very useful to understand this stuff. But so as somebody who's very, very familiar with addiction and recovery and stress and health and mental health stuff, I have been so overjoyed at the spate of bills legalizing marijuana use all around the country, because marijuana has not only been a divisive social issue, it has been used to also wrongly incarcerate people, especially minority populations, people of color, people that are black and brown. Marijuana possession has been used disproportionately to incarcerate people. And, here in the United States, we have the largest per capita prison population in the entire world. And most of that is drug based. And people who use drugs are trying to alleviate themselves of suffering. Drug use is the term self-medication is often used very derisively, especially by white people who are sanctimonious and hypocritical. like, yeah, drug use is self-medication. It is like people who are suffering mentally and physically are become addicted, or even if they're not addicted, using it recreationally. The entire purpose is stress relief. That's why people drink. That's why people get prescription medications to deal with mental illness. You know, is why people eat food too, or even engage in. You can even engaging in like high risk athletic behavior, like, you know, like extreme athletes and dangerous rock climbing and you know, risk and, like, you know, thrill seeking. All of that is all of that is mental health coping mechanisms. It's all self-medication. Like, we as a human species are have a complex innate endocrine system and stress hormone system that helps to mediate our behavior as a human animal. And um you know, we have like everyone has their own ways of coping with stress, and drug use should not be criminalized. It's awful. It's so um wrong, and also disproportionately applied in using for tools of racist segregation of society. So seeing um this kind of thing reverse course and start legalizing this legalizing pot and stuff like that is really great, because it's not just correcting misconceptions and uh undeserved uh government overreach around marijuana, but also helping to neutralize those systems of oppression that affect all of us and destabilize society and make uh life harder for all of us, not even just those that are suppressed. I mean, like, you know, it's the biggest irony of ironies is that, like, you know, white drug crusaders of the last few decades, their efforts you know, were meant to, like, control impoverished, segregated populations and minorities, but it ends up hurting white people too. I mean, it hurts everybody. Like, you know, white people get caught up in those laws when they're also impoverished and suffering. I mean, you can't just implement racist um policies and regulations and expect them to only affect your targets. Like, humans are humans. We're all human. We're all living in a society under the same laws and regulations, and, you know, it hurts everybody. um and even if it didn't hurt everybody, it's still completely amoral and horrible. And it also shows, you know, a complete and total lack of compassion for people suffering and understanding why people use drugs. And yeah, so that's why we talk about it. So anyway, okay, so marijuana is great. I only smoke occasionally though. Like, I'll probably only, actually, I haven't even smoked this year. um I don't, you know, I don't really go looking for it, but if it's like around, like, I'll totally, like, you know, smoke with people. um but yeah, so the primary so my well yeah, so I'll start with my history of it. So I started the first time I smoked was when I was like 26. And I'd had a lot of friends that smoked, and I'd wanted to try it, but I was, you know, having been raised in a Mormon community, I was really scared to try it. So it took a few years for me to get up the courage to actually try it. So the first time that I did, I waited until I was at a party with a lot of people that I knew really well, and I smoked. And like it stereotypically does, the first time I used it, it didn't have any effect on me. I might have felt like a little bit relaxed, but it really didn't do anything. And that can sometimes be misleading, because then the next time that you do it is you might have more abandon when you're trying it and think it's not going to do anything, so you have more, and then you get really, really blasted. But the first time I actually had um pot, though not smoking it, was when I was like 21. um After my suicide attempt, when I tried to go back home and live in Hawaii with my family, I made some friends there that were big pot smokers, and the first time I had marijuana was baked into I think it was a brownie or a cookie. I think it was a brownie. And also that time it didn't do anything to me then either. So there was like several years between. I totally forgot about that experience. There were several years between that And I also had a very very tiny amount. So because I was scared to try it. So anyway though, so it was great though. So then when I like started smoking again, it actually had like a incredible effect on me, and it really knocked me off. And actually, and I often talk about my size, which is relevant to a lot of metabolic issues and health. Like I'm 6'7", and at the time when I was younger I was 225 pounds. And it got to where just like smoking, like I kid you not, like the smallest little like leaf, like just like a single leaf of pot would get me completely blasted. And I don't, I don't know why. I was such a lightweight. Like, and if I had like a lot of it, I would just be out, like my just gone, like just so gone. So like so smoking, even just taking one drag off of a a vape or a cigarette would be plenty for me to get high. And so it was really nice because it wasn't like I was spending like a ton of money on getting high every day. I one time had a wake and bake roommate who like had a vape and the bag system, and he would literally like smoke like two full bags, not bag, sorry, not like a baggie where you contain it, but like when you like old school vapes used to be like you had to attach like an inflatable trash bag, like a tiny trash bag to the end of it, so that and it filled up with smoke, and then you would inhale the smoke from that. I mean, that wasn't always the case. I mean, not all devices were like that, but his was. So he would like to smoke two whole things of that before work. Then he would smoke. He would come home from lunch and smoke, and then when he got home from work, he would smoke. And then he would go to the gym, and then when he got back from the gym, and he would smoke, and he would do that every single day. And oh my god, I would be a total zombie if I did that, because I was so sensitive to pot that like just taking like a single drag would like totally get me high. But anyway, so I really liked it. Like it's really nice. Like smoking pot is actually like really relaxing. Like there's a reason people do it. Like it's really nice. Um, I find it, I find it personally. I tried to smoke cigarettes, nicotine, tobacco, when I was like 35, 36, and I was a bad smoker. I would forget that I was smoking, and just like for like a month later I'd be like, oh yeah, I haven't had a cigarette in a while. That's why, and we'll get to that. Like this is why like nicotine isn't addicting at all, actually. um I would just forget that I was like trying to be a smoker. And but anyway, so but I like marijuana is a lot nicer because it like it lasts a lot longer. Like if you smoke a cigarette, like its relaxing effects kind of only last about 10-15 minutes. But smoking pot, like it relaxes you for like a good hour, you know. um but I had really bad negative experiences, and I've talked about this stuff before with eating it. And at the height, not the height, on my way up the heights of alcoholism, I um drove drunk and stoned one time and crashed my car into a concrete wall. And sadly that wasn't enough to actually get me sober yet either at the time. And a big part of that was because I had like quite a bit of pot brownies. I'd been drinking, and then they had pot brownies around too, and I had one. And then I was like, this didn't do anything. And so like I had another one, but like I hadn't waited long enough for it to do anything to me. And when you eat marijuana, it lasts in your body like way longer than smoking. And like and because of that experience, I like will never eat marijuana, because the like if you smoke it, the effect, and you smoke too much or you get too high, the effect will go away within in like 30 minutes to 45 minutes, maybe an hour. But if you eat it, it stays in your body for hours. And so it's like really hard to get out of that. So I do discourage people from using edibles, unless you're being very safe in very specific environments. It can be really unpredictable and really unhelpful. Or if like it's like a really, really low dose, it's not as safe as a lot of people make it out to be. You can really fuck yourself up with edibles. And also never drive drunk, never drive smoking and stoned. It's such a bad idea. Some people do that too, and it just like you cannot do that. You need to plan ahead, not put yourself in those situations or other people in those situations. But yeah, anyway, so the biochemistry behind marijuana. So the reason that marijuana makes us feel good, is because its primary activity, and this is also why it's like therapeutic both physically. Hello, Jay. Yeah, you had about it. Oh, okay. Before I get into that, I'll tell. Shortly after I had my accident, probably like 6 months to a year, I got invited to a birthday party in Vegas, and so we drove up to Vegas. And at the party, someone pulled out like this huge tray of edibles for the birthday boy. And I mean, there were cakes and cookies and everything, and I was like, "Oh fuck! Like, no way! Like, like, no, thank you." And the next day, they nobody really had any. They had like a few pieces when we went out to the pool, and we had a nice day. But the next day, like, I had a hangover. I was still drinking at the time, and I was with my boyfriend at the Mirage, which is such a gross hotel now too. Like, oh god, I won't even relate those stories. They didn't clean the room properly. It was disgusting. But anyway, so we're at the Mirage, and we get a call from our friends they're at a different hotel. They're at like Mandalay Bay or something like that. And we were gonna go over, but we get a call from them, and my friend says, "Can you help us? Come over. We need your help." And he sounded panicked. I was like, "What's going on? What's wrong?" He's like, just come over here. Just come over." And so I was like, "Oh, okay." So we got dressed. Like, I had a headache. We get in the car, and Vegas fucking smells too. Like, I hate Vegas. Like, it smells like everywhere you are. Like, the room smelled because it wasn't cleaned great. But then you go down into the casino, and it smells like fake. It smells like cigarette smoke and like pumped in fake scent. And that fake scent is even stronger in the lobby when you enter. So I was just like about to vomit, like everywhere I was going. And then you get in the outside, and the outside smelled like sewage. And then you get into the cab, and the cab smelled like cab freshener. Oh, it was awful. It was so bad. But anyway, so we get to the hotel. We get up to their room, and we come in, and the all the curtains are closed, and they're kind of like wandering around the room, and I was like, "What's going on?" And my friend says, "I feel like we're going to get in so much trouble. Please don't call the police on us." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Just please don't call the police." And I was like, "What are you saying? Like, did something happen?" He's like, "No, we're just really high." And I was like, "Oh my god." And we couldn't find our other friend, and we were like, "Where is he?" And he's like, "Oh, he's in the bedroom." And he was like, this guy was like, he was under the covers, just like completely hidden. And like, they had drawn the curtains closed because they were like so high. So anyway, so we put so we set them up in the bed, and we put on Ina Garten on the Barefoot Contessa so they could watch it, so they could relax and chill out, because they were so stoned because they'd eaten like they thought it was like they ate some more of the edibles. It's not always a great idea to do that. Okay, anyway, so the biochemistry behind it. So the biochemistry behind but like first off, the reason that it makes you feel good is because the primary effect of THC is to inhibit adrenaline release. And adrenaline is a stress hormone. And all of you immediately, like, who know what adrenaline does, you go, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense." Like, yeah, like, so, because adrenaline is a stress hormone. Our body is constantly expressing adrenaline, though. One of the primary functions of adrenaline is to release glucose from glycogen storage. And if you don't know this, our body stores sugar in structures that are called glycogen. It's the animal equivalent of starch. So just like plants store sugar energy as starch, we store it as glycogen. And so when you eat like carbohydrate in a meal, your body packs glycogen into your muscles and your liver. And then in between meals, your muscles consume the glycogen in them, and your liver will slowly release glucose to the bloodstream to keep your to keep your blood sugar even. And and this also helps also to regulate excess glucose circulation in your bloodstream, which is dysfunctional in people with diabetes. The storage of glycogen prevents excess glucose from getting into your bloodstream and being wasted and overdriving your metabolic rate. Like literally, like your metabolic rate is just driven by there's chemical regulators, and like sodium is involved, but basically there's just the presence of glucose in your bloodstream and in your cells is what drives cellular energy metabolism. So if you have excess glucose in there, if you don't have diabetes, your cells will like overproduce energy, and so the body prevents that by regulating sugar release into the bloodstream. A lot of that is performed by the function of glycogen. And adrenaline is what stimulates glycogen release from glucose release from glycogen storage. So we constantly have a small, like very small releases of adrenaline. And when you have a little bit of a rise in adrenaline, is when you feel like a little bit excited. You know, if you're like, you know, when you were a kid and your parents like announced you're gonna go to like a theme park or Disneyland, and you got all excited, like that's like a little bit of adrenaline. And that's what like adrenaline, like a little bit of adrenaline, like makes you feel really great. I often talk. This is a perfect time of year for the Northern Hemisphere to talk about this. A lot of people get really excited at the advent of winter, like, oh, the holidays are coming up, and I love the holidays. But in fact, it's actually not really the holidays, the prospect of the holidays that's making you feel that way. It is, or the advent of winter. It's that they just because you're thinking about it. Literally, the change in the composition of the sunlight that reaches Earth at the angle that is hitting the Earth is a trigger for our inactive hibernation response, because as human beings we don't hibernate, but we still possess the response actually. And we have our anti-hibernation response is actually a higher adrenaline. So you get a little bit of a boost biochemically from the advent of winter because it's our anti-hibernation response that's actually which is adrenaline, which is actually making you excited. And you know the you know the other stuff is great. Like it's great, you know, that you love winter and holidays, but really like the part of the thrill is the increase of adrenaline. For the same reason, the longer that winter drags on, the excess in adrenaline starts to drain your dopamine, because adrenaline is made from dopamine, which is made from the amino acid L-tyrosine. And so a chronically elevated adrenaline will drain your dopamine and start to make you feel depressed. And that's why depression very often sets in during winter time. And if you experience that, you need to buy my book, read it, read the chapters on depression. There's a stream on here on depression. There's articles on my website about depression that go in like a lot more detail and into how that works. But so a little bit of adrenaline makes you feel excited and great, because in part it's releasing glucose, and your body makes energy from that glucose. But when you start to get metabolically ill or aging, or you have a chronic light deficiency, that one's the biggest one. Also, human beings are some of the strongest adrenaline stimulants. Anytime that you have a negative thought, or not even a negative thought, any kind of excitement or conflict with other human beings, that releases adrenaline. Quite a few men, unfortunately, far more young men nowadays than was usually typical of the human experience, have a problem called performance anxiety when they have sex, because when you are about to have sex with somebody, your body releases adrenaline in order to prepare your body for the physical act of engaging in sexual intercourse. And literally just anticipating it happening is what releases the adrenaline. And if you're metabolically ill, the adrenaline causes uh, water loss from your bloodstream, which then deflates your erection, and so then you can't get aroused. And I talk about that on all my stuff on libido health and erectile health. So adrenaline has really, and other human beings have really potent influence on our endocrine system and the expression of adrenaline. And this is one of the reasons why smoking marijuana is so fun and so relaxing, is because it chemically impairs adrenaline release. So it forces your body to feel relaxed to an extent. Hello, Avo. Going well, thank you. It's having a nice day. Happy Halloween to everybody who's in the U.S. So, sorry, not just in the U.S. Everybody that celebrates that or related holidays, as we were talking about earlier. So, so that's why we smoke marijuana, because marijuana, why people smoke it, and why people also can get addicted to it, because especially when you have like a lot of people don't understand, and this is why nicotine is not addictive either. When you have addiction issues, addiction is a function of mental stress and the endocrine system and and your neurology. Addiction is a neurological problem, not that of chemical substances. Chemical substances treat the underlying condition of neurological issues that are what addiction actually is. And when you grow up in abusive environments or have traumatic experiences, those have outsized effect on your neurological response to that issue. And so you experience heightened neurological and endocrine stress from stressful stimuli compared to people that do not have addiction. That is a gross oversimplification of it, but also I detail that in my stream on addiction that's on here, and in my book on addiction, and there's articles on addiction in my blog that really go into detail about how that neurology works. So that's why, marijuana is great, because it inhibits adrenaline release. It makes you feel more relaxed, because adrenaline is a stress hormone, and the more stress that you have, the stronger your response is to smoking marijuana, because you say, for instance, like all the factors that I just mentioned, like, so that's why like sugar deficiency, carbohydrate deficiency more strongly increases your adrenaline expression. Conflict with other human beings more strongly causes adrenaline expression. Sunlight deprivation causes more pronounced adrenaline expression. So if you have those factors of increased adrenaline expression, you tend to like to smoke marijuana more often, because you have more stress in your life. And so, and then it also has a more pronounced effect on your physiology because of that chronic excessive adrenaline expression. And this is also why it's useful in treating mental health disorders and also pain. Although actually there's more to the pain thing that we're going to get into. Because of the, like, so people that have like really problematic mental health disorders like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and depression, we have extremely elevated adrenaline expression. There are also microbiological factors. There are a whole host of opportunistic microbes that produce adrenaline analogs from the amino acids tyrosine and phenylalanine. They're called biogenic amines, and they're like histamine. I just said that wrong. I mean, it sounded like histamine is made from histidine, but biogenic amines are histamine, tryptamine, putrescine, cadaverine, spermidine, and then the adrenaline analogs are tyramine and I think it's I can't remember. It's phenethylamine. They are even more potent adrenaline stimulants than adrenaline, and they're made by microbiological organisms, and they can inhabit your gut. So when you have gut dysbiosis, and these are basically like amino acids of putrefaction, like decay. When you see food going bad on the store shelves and it starts to get moldy and smelly and gross, like that, or like, you left it too long in your fridge or on your counter, those same products of putrefaction are being made by those microbes in your gut that then have really harmful, potent metabolic regulating effects on your body. and they underlie problems like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and depression, um, and insomnia as well. And so literally like microbes can get in and cause derangement of your endocrine system and promote excessive adrenaline activity. So so smoking, so when you come across like things like marijuana, actively and effectively treat that actually by inhibiting the adrenaline response. So, as a lot of you smart people have probably already intuited from that, that's also why we get the munchies when you smoke marijuana, is because the mechanism of action of sugar release from glycogen storage is inhibited by marijuana. So you immediately start to get hungry because your blood sugar starts to drop. And so a lot of people don't know about that. I mean, I don't think hardly anybody knows about this at all. But so you can have really unpleasant side effects sometimes from smoking pot if you do not eat food before and during using it. There's this there's this actor, really good actor named Justice Smith, who he's young, and he's been in some comedies and things like that, and he's really good. And anyway, but he was on a stream of what's his name, Susan Sarandon's son. I'm thinking of his character's name. I can't remember his name because he's really good too. But anyway, they were chatting about an experience that Justice had. Sorry, I need to look up his name so I give him a good shout out. Miles Robbins. They were talking excuse me. They were talking about an experience that Justice had getting high when he started like shaking and like was really paranoid. And the reason for that is because marijuana really potently inhibits adrenaline expression. So your blood sugar can plummet so low that you literally start to shake and have neurological issues because of the lack of glucose circulating in your bloodstream. So it can actually be dangerous. And this is also why, and guess what? Okay, so and a lot of people don't understand this. The way the endocrine system works is that when you run out of blood sugar, like so your blood sugar starts to drop, so the body then releases adrenaline. But we only have so much sugar storage in our body, especially if you're not eating carbohydrate. You'll eventually run out of it. And when that happens, when your blood sugar starts to drop below a certain point, what your body does is then it releases the stress hormone cortisol. And what cortisol does is, okay, so the body with adrenaline expression, the body only releases glucose from glycogen from the liver. It does not release sugar storage from the muscles. The muscles consume the glycogen that they contain, but they don't release it to the bloodstream. So when your blood sugar though starts to fall low enough, cortisol gets released, and what cortisol does is it actually destroys your muscle tissue in order to release that sugar as well as amino acids from muscle to provide those nutrients for more important organs like your brain and your heart, because you would literally fucking die if this did not work this way. And lots of people do, actually. When you see like because our body also uses fatty acids for energy production, but when you see like marathon runners drop dead suddenly, oh, they're so healthy, like they have like absolutely no fat and muscle on them. The reason they die is because their body literally gets completely 100% depleted of sugar because they are overtraining, under eating, over consuming their sugar storage and their fat storage. And then when they're engaged in a stressful athletic activity like running without a break, they'll literally hit a point where the body completely runs out of sugar, and there's no fat to call back on. and there's no glycogen storage in the muscles or the liver to call on, and so their organs literally just give out and they die. Like that's what literally happens. So that's why we have adrenaline and cortisol, is to prevent that problem from happening, that problem of dying. And so like when you smoke pot, because it so strongly inhibits adrenaline expression, you don't have sugar release into your bloodstream. So you need to eat. And if you don't, the expression of cortisol can become so high that it then causes paranoia. And this happened to me not too long into starting to smoke marijuana as a young man, because I was engaged in destructive dieting behaviors. And also I kind of want to mention this, like when I was younger, I was like, in my 20s, mid 20s, I'm like tall, good looking, fit-ish. I say ish because I worked out so much that I couldn't really put on muscle. Because of the function of cortisol, which tears it down. I realized this the other day or a while ago, when I was like, talking about dieting and stuff with people, that like, say for instance, if you're female and you're like, hiding, like not eating food, and you're hiding an eating disorder, or you have bulimia, like people are just all too willing to point out that you have that's an eating disorder. But when you're like 26 and tall and athletic, it's called dieting and exercise. There is no such thing as healthy dieting. All dieting behavior is an eating disorder. There is not rational at all to deprive yourself of nutrients and calories for health. It doesn't work that way. And yeah, you'll have millions of people tell you otherwise, but that is not how the body works. When you starve yourself and you undereat calories, you are always causing endocrinological stress on the body that results in high cortisol production. And then cortisol tears down your muscle and your internal organs. It works on the fat and muscle first. Actually, it works on muscle first, not fat. And so a lot of people diet because they want to lose fat, but what you actually lose is muscle bulk, and it retains your fat, so you lose muscle that actually burns calories. So then you put on even more weight because of the effect of the catabolizing effect of cortisol. Cortisol though does not only have that effect on the muscles, it acts there first, but it also tears down your organs, your thyroid, your liver, your kidneys, your parathyroid, your brain. Cortisol is very, very destructive because, again, remember, the purpose of cortisol is to catabolize tissue structures to turn them into free sugars and protein to keep you from dying. So when you see people with really extreme eating disorders that start to become emaciated and lose their hair, they're at such a point that they literally have run out of sufficient muscle bulk for cortisol to act on, and it is now consuming your skin and your hair and your other metabolic pathways in order to try to keep you alive. That same thing happens when you're fit and healthy. It doesn't matter. Like we don't have all human beings share the same biology and the same biological function. Like all dieting is an eating disorder, and when you diet, you drive up these stress hormones. So then when you like smoke pot, you go immediately to paranoia because your blood sugar is already low in the first place, and your glycogen storage is already low, and your muscle bulk might be really low. And so then when you smoke, it cuts off your adrenaline and the release of any of what little blood sugar and sugar release you already have. And so then your cortisol just skyrockets. And then cortisol is really unpleasant and produces anxiety because of its catabolic effect on the body. And so you go right into paranoia. So when you experience paranoia smoking marijuana, that is a real alarm signal that you are not maintaining your blood sugar and glycogen stores properly. And conversely, you can also prevent that effect by eating before and during when you do smoke. Because then that keeps you, especially if it's sugary, carbohydrate-rich food, you can keep your blood sugar up, and then you don't get those really negative effects. And then you're eating all night, but that's fine. and then that helps to like reduce the catabolic stress that can occur during smoking. For this same reason, though, is why marijuana can be used for pain management. It is not the ideal way to do it, but it's better than most other available options pharmacologically and pharmaceutically and stuff like that. Because basically, when you smoke pot, what you're basically doing is you're forcing the expression of steroids. It's like the same thing that occurs when you go in to get like emergency treatment in the hospital, is they pump you full of like prednisone and other steroids to try to keep your high tech that tries to keep your body functioning, which in part is fueled by the availability of sugars and amino acids that occur from the expression of both adrenaline and cortisol. So when you smoke pot, if you have like chronic pain or other issues like that, you're basically like inducing so back up a little bit. So when you usually when you have pain, you already have endocrinological dysfunction, so you have high adrenaline, and that makes it worse, like your pain, because you also feel really uncomfortable. So when you smoke pot, it stops adrenaline production, which also preserves your glycogen storage because you're not constantly consuming it. And then the cortisol release is like getting a shot of prednisone, which then catabolizes your lean tissue into usable sugars and amino acids that can then help rescue your declining metabolic rate that's causing the pain in the first place, but while also preserving your glycogen, so that later when your smoking wears off, you actually then still have sugar storage in your liver that continues to provide sugar for your muscles and tissues, which you can support that function and maybe even not need it at all if you just eat fucking carbohydrate. If you just keep your blood sugar up, that has almost exactly the same effect as, and also protein if you eat no protein, but it has the same effect as getting a shot of prednisone or smoking pot. Like a lot of people like that have, my grandma comes to mind who died, a decade ago, who was religious and Mormon and believed in not smoking pot, but did at the end of her life because she was in so much pain. But she was also, burdened by, body image trauma, growing up in those kinds of generations that believed that her value as a human being came from how her appearance, and wanted to stay skinny, just didn't eat enough food. And that, and not having sugar, compromises, a lot of those functions. But so, and tech, sorry, to answer your question, that's a really broad condition that has a lot of potential factors, so I can't really address it right now. But yes, there are things that you can do to address that. And remind me after I'm done talking about this main topic, and we can chat more about it at the end of this. Yeah, okay. So relevant though to smoking marijuana for pain management, I can briefly tell you, and my book talks about pain a lot more, but pain, a little brief on pain. Pain is always the excess presence of calcium in cells, especially nerve cells. Calcium is not supposed to remain inside of cells, and when it does, it's because of an impairment in metabolic respiration from injury or metabolic disease. And then the nervous system, like if you get a cut, like all those cells that are involved in that cannot manage their calcium, and the calcium accumulates, and that is what the pain signal is. So when you do things that well, obviously you can take medicines, but all those do, usually all the pain management meds do is to inhibit the pain response. But if you increase the metabolic rate, which restores cells' ability to remove that calcium, that's how you resolve chronic pain. And my book goes in depth about how to do that. But that's what's happening when you smoke pot. It's not when you smoke pot. Its pain management tool is not from masking the pain impulse the way that, like, say, ibuprofen might do. Which, by the way, those like Tylenol and ibuprofen lower cellular metabolic respiration, so they actually prolong pain. So, like, for instance, like if you like giving birth and going through labor is like one of the biggest, like, instance examples I can think of. If after birth, giving birth, you're in a lot of pain and you take Tylenol or ibuprofen, yeah, it will deaden your pain, but it will also double your healing time. So you'll be in pain for weeks and weeks and weeks instead of just a few days. And oppositely, if you use like low dose aspirin, don't take high doses because it can go in your breast milk as well. But if you like, if you use metabolically restorative strategies like taking aspirin and eating a lot of sugar and getting some sunshine and vitamin C and stuff like that, like a lot of fruit, you'll heal. Even though it doesn't really deaden the pain, you'll heal a lot more quickly, so that you'll only be in pain for a few days rather than several weeks or even months after, because you need to supply cells with enough energy so that they can repair themselves and restore the ability to export calcium, and that is what resolves the pain. So when you smoke marijuana for pain management, what you're actually doing is that by stimulating cortisol release and the subsequent release of sugars and amino acids, you're temporarily empowering those cells that are in pain to resolve their calcium excess. And so it's not just an analgesic. It's actually like it's literally like resolving the problem at its core. But the problem is that your eating behaviors and the way that you treat your body, and also the pathogenic organisms that you were colonized by, are not resolved, and so you chronically continue to experience pain, whereas otherwise it would be resolved, even by smoking pot, if your dieting habits and the way that you treat your body and resolution of pathogenic chronic infections were resolved also. Yeah, so it's ironic that the same reason that pot causes paranoia and the munchies is also why it can be used for pain management. But if you want your pain to resolve long term, you have to promote cellular respiration and energy production in order to facilitate normal calcium metabolism in your cells. So yeah, so that's why. So that's a marijuana, and marijuana is like not harmful like for any other. It doesn't raise cancer. Actually, like people have tried to connect marijuana to cancer, as a scare tactic, to prevent people from using it. But the reason that marijuana does not promote cancer is because of its cortisol. Because cortisol as a catabolic hormone is both tears down tumors and provides sugars and amino acids for torporific tissue, which would otherwise become cancerous, to resolve those issues, to restore metabolic respiration and energy production, which, especially if it's like promoted by good dietary habits. And obviously, like I talk about cancer in all my work too, it is not carcinogenic because of that. Yeah, so it's not even like harmful. But vaping pot, I mean, vaping pot is kind of fine. But so let's talk about, though, since we're talking about vaping and stuff, we'll switch over to tobacco and nicotine, which is a whole different thing. So I've also wrongly said this too in the past. I think I mentioned that cigarettes. I heard, and this was incorrect of me, that cancer from smoking cigarettes was mostly caused by the filter and the fiberglass shards in there. But that was not wrong. That was not correct. Most cigarette filters are not made out of fiberglass. There was a period of time where like fiberglass was present in cigarettes, or maybe even the filter, but that's not generally the case. and filters are usually made out of like cellulose, or there's stuff that's actually not harmful. But um, uh, the reason I'm talking though, I mean, yeah, obviously they're both smoking. Smoking pot is smoking, and smoking cigarettes is smoking, and vaping is smoking. So there's kind of a, it kind of ties them all in. But tobacco and marijuana couldn't be more different. Smoking cigarettes is not all harmful. It is harmful. They're don't get me wrong. Smoking cigarettes is harmful. Smoking pot is not harmful. Smoking cigarettes is harmful though, but it can be nice. Like, nicotine is like fun to take for a little bit. But there's actually there's different reasons why tobacco and smoking cigarettes is relaxing that are completely and wholly separate from how marijuana does it. Um, uh, and smoking and smoking tobacco can cause like carcinogenic things, especially also though it doesn't help that cigarettes are often formulated with other chemicals that volatilize and that produce carcinogens also themselves. But smoking pot, but smoking cigarettes, smoking tobacco and nicotine results in like nitrogen dioxide synthesis, which is really oxidizing and harmful for the lungs. I'm sure marijuana does that to some extent too, but it's just not to the degree that tobacco does, and especially because of the nature of marijuana and its effect on the body. For instance, like adrenaline can be oxidized, and so like blocking adrenaline. Oh, actually, too. I'm sorry. I need to mention this too because this is very important. One time, and this actually is. We're backing up here. My brain is like, there's a lot. There's too much. Somebody contacted me not too long ago and said that they were feeling really uncomfortable and having a really hard time with their health and did not know what was going on. So they did a short coaching stint, filled out the survey and everything. Turns out that because they had heard that adrenaline was a stress hormone and was quote unquote bad for you, they were taking beta blockers. And a lot of people are on beta blockers, especially if you're older, if you had a heart attack. People use beta blockers on purpose to block adrenaline to lower the effects of adrenaline. And because adrenaline can be vasoconstrictive, actually, when you have high adrenaline expression, it chokes off circulation to the periphery of your body, so that can actually promote hair loss and cold extremities. It's good that your body does this though, because what's really happening is it's redirecting blood flow to the core of your body to keep your internal organs warm enough to actually function. If we didn't have that, you would actually you could risk getting so cold that your heart stops. So like this is supposed to do this. You don't want to block that. When you've had a heart attack or you've had cardiovascular problems, taking a beta blocker will actually increase your risk of stroke and other issues like that. Even though it might, big emphasis on might reduce your risk of another heart attack. Inhibiting your adrenaline like that inhibits your sugar release from glycogen storage the same way that like smoking pot chronically does. So you can actually further endanger your body because your body responds to that with a concomitant increase in cortisol expression. So this woman who came to me for help, because she was using beta blockers of her own volition, was chronically blocking adrenaline as if she was smoking pot 24 hours a day. And so was having extremely high cortisol expression. And because cortisol is catabolic, it was causing her to be really, really uncomfortable and have really negative side effects. Also, like people who try to work out and build muscle who smoke pot too much have a really hard time building muscle because of the catabolic nature of cortisol expression, which again can be inhibited if you keep your blood sugar up, but it's really hard to do that like all the time. And so it's impossible to do that if you do use it excessively, the same way as if you were like injecting yourself with prednisone every single day. And by the way, prednisone can also have these negative side effects because it's catabolic. It tears down your tissues. So anyway, so you don't want to, like, do not misunderstand this, that, like, like these hormones are good and they have purposes. You don't want to be interfering with them. And anyway, the way to do this, and a lot of people in forum culture have, is that there's this idea of biohacking where you want to force your body to do what you think it should do. It's so fucking stupid. Like, I don't even know that much about the body, and I know more about the body than anybody on the entire planet. Like, you do not want to force anytime you try to force the body to do something like that, there's always a reaction from other systems to make up for that problem. You never force the body to do something it doesn't want to do or can't do. You will always incur consequences. You have to instead coax the body back to health and wellness by treating it right, by supplying the nutrients and resources that it requires to function normally. Lots of you know that I'm currently working on my next update, which, yes, I promise it's upcoming. I've been saying this almost for a full year now. It is almost done. I'm having such great progress on all my research that I'm doing. I'm just not done with it yet. The more research that I do, the less supplements I find are even necessary. Like, literally, like when I release my update in a few weeks or months, there's going to be almost no supplement use in it, because my research just continuously uncovers the way in which chemicals and compounds in our environment from food and other resources, and not literally just food, but just like how the environment shapes our physiology. If you go in and are taking beta blockers, like, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. You're not even a scientist, and you're like taking beta blockers, for fun. So, like, this is so dangerous. Don't do that kind of shit. So anyway, I interrupted my thing on nicotine. What was I talking about? But yeah, but anyway, because adrenaline, yeah. Anyway, okay, so nicotine, cigarettes, and tobacco, I mean. The primary reason, I'm going to blow all your minds. The primary reason that people use tobacco, cigarettes, and not like vaping juice, but like actual like tobacco, is not the nicotine. Actually, everyone makes a big hullabaloo about how nicotine is addictive and blah blah blah. And yeah, nicotine does have pharmacological effects on the body, but that is not the reason that people use tobacco and smoke cigarettes. And in fact, too, you even see with like a lot of people who do engage in vaping will still smoke regular cigarettes, and will find that smoking actual cigarettes is more enjoyable than vaping, even though they'll vape mostly. And most people that are vaping are actually vaping pot, so that's a whole different thing. But but it's not nicotine. It's not nicotine. The reason that smoking tobacco is relaxing is actually because of a way in which our immune system works. And for quite a while now, and the current version of my book does talk about this, so if you have my book, you'll be familiar with this probably, is that the immune system, when people talk about the immune system, they often talk about like T cells, and other leukocytes and macrophages and blah, 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 whatever. That actually isn't that important. What is more important is what those cells actually do. And what most of those cells do is this system called the peroxidase system, in which immune cells oxidize the halides, the chemical halide elements, into what are called hypohalous acids. And those hypohalous acids are used then to kill microbes. And sorry if I'm talking slower today. Like, this is just a lot of information. Even my brain is having a hard time keeping up with it. The halides are fluoride, iodide, bromide, chloride, and this one rare element that I'd never heard of until yesterday, and now it's escaped my mind. It only has like a half-life of like 8 hours, so it's like very rare. But our body doesn't use that one. And the pseudo halide cyanide, actually, those substrates are used by immune cells to kill microorganisms. And they're very effective. And it also doesn't really, like, they're not the most oxidized form of those. Like, for instance, like perchlorate is many times more oxidized than hypochlorite, which is like has just like one oxygen atom added to it, and that's made from chloride, from chlorine, from elemental chlorine, and mostly from our dietary salt. Like, you know, salt is sodium chloride, so you get plenty of chloride, which is an immune substrate actually for the immune system, which the immune system then oxidizes into hypochlorous acid, which, guess what, is bleach. And there's a lot of really misguided people out there who are taking like chlorine dioxide tablets in order to like use bleach to kill their microorganisms. And oh my God, like they're just like the stupidity. I mean, I get it. Like, I know why you're desperate to get better, but you're basically just putting bleach into your body. And yeah, your body already makes bleach, but guess what? Hypochlorous acid is the most oxidating of all of those substrates. It causes the most oxidative stress. It's the most abundant, but it's not the preferential substrate for the immune system, actually. The preferential substrate for most of the peroxidase enzymes are the other halides, but also actually cyanide. Cyanide is the number 1 preferred substrate for like lactoperoxidase and myeloperoxidase. And only when our body is deficient in cyanide and iodine and bromide and fluoride does it then use chloride as the substrate. And because chloride is the most abundant, though, and our diets are very often poor in iodine and cyanide and bromide, our body then does quite regularly use chloride as an immune substrate. In fact, this is the reason for the stereotypical therapeutic nature of chicken soup, which actually has nothing to do with fucking chicken. Wait, I shouldn't phrase it that way. That doesn't fucking have anything to do with chicken. Is that the chicken soup is just usually made with like a huge heaping amount of salt. So when you drink, like when you have chicken soup when you're sick, like it's a really delicious way to supplement a huge amount of salt that then empowers the immune system. If you've ever had, like, you know, when you have a sinus infection, you know, or like, you know, nasal problems, you'll be very familiar with the fact that your snot becomes green. That green color is the peroxidase enzymes. Peroxidase enzymes are made out of heme, which when it is used becomes methemoglobin, which has a green hue to it. And so like that's like your body is like expressing lots of peroxidase enzymes in order to make the hypohalous acids to kill the pathogens that are causing that disease. So the immune system uses chloride, but chloride is the most oxidizing and causes the most oxidative damage. So when you have chronic conditions, you have chronic colonization by opportunistic microbes, your immune system is chronically activated. And because chloride is the most abundant substrate, but also the least effective substrate for the immune system, it doesn't clear fully those pathogenic infections. And at the same time also causes chronic oxidative stress to your body. Cyanide, dietary cyanide, excuse me, has not only is the preferential substrate for the immune system in the peroxidase enzymes, it actually just spontaneously scavenges hypochlorous acid and steals the oxygen from hypochlorous acid, reducing it back into harmless chloride. And hypothiocyanous acid, which is the result of that, is the least oxidizing and most effective of all of the halides, or pseudohalide in the case of cyanide, substrate for the immune system. So cyanide relieves the body of the oxidative stress of the chloride. And yes, a lot of you who probably know the chemistry of smoking, tobacco, when you smoke tobacco, you inhale usually a huge amount of hydrogen cyanide. And the reason that smoking tobacco is relaxing to people when they smoke it is because they have chronic immune activation and excess hypochlorous acid circulating in their body, causing chronic oxidative stress, which makes you irritated and uptight and angry all the time. And so when you smoke a cigarette, by flooding your body with the cyanide, that cyanide scavenges all of that hypochlorous acid and turns it into hypothiocyanous acid, which then relieves your body of the oxidative stress. So it is actually an immune treatment, which is why smoking tobacco makes you feel better, not the nicotine that it contains. So that is also why it's really difficult for people to give up smoking, is because when you have a hard, like if you feel addicted to cigarettes and you have a hard time quitting them, you have chronic colonization by opportunistic microbes, and your diet is sorely deficient in cyanide. So you have chronic excess hypochlorous acid production, and your only source of cyanide that you get in your daily life is from tobacco. So every time that you start to run out of the cyanide in your body and it starts to shift back into excess hypochlorous acid, because it apparently doesn't last for very long, and the reason for that is because of antioxidant strategies that these pathogens also have that prevents them from, and that's a way more complicated than, I won't be getting into that in the stream. It will be in my book in the update. But basically, it's because you don't eat your vegetables. So there's a lot of dietary sources of cyanide actually in our normal diet. Most leafy greens have cyanide in them. Kale, spinach, broccoli, almonds have cyanide. Even apple seeds have cyanide. So like if you if you are having a hard time quitting cigarettes, chew on apple seeds and almonds and eat your leafy greens, and that in turn provides more cyanide substrate for the immune system, which will then alleviate you of the hypochlorous acid stress that's actually causing your discomfort and your chronic agitation and irritation. This is one of the reasons too why it can be difficult for people to give up other drugs and alcohol too, because like for instance, alcohol is antimicrobial, so every time you just get blasted off your ass from too much tequila, like part of the reason that you're drinking, and the reason that I drank so much when I was younger, is because having cystic fibrosis impaired my immune system, made me very susceptible to chronic colonization by pathogenic organisms. So my immune system was always on. So drinking excessively flooded my entire body with so much alcohol that it would actually suppress a lot of those opportunistic infections and make me feel better. So like nicotine smoking is actually therapeutic to chronic, and then this is the real kicker here. This is the part that just really infuriates me, because so many studies will show correlations between metabolic disease and smoking and then blame the smoking, when in fact actually the smoking is a self-medication strategy used by people who have chronic metabolic disease because of medicine's general ineptitude when it comes to knowing what the fuck is going on with metabolic disease, which is always chronic colonization by opportunistic microbes, by Candida and H. pylori and C. difficile and all the many, and Porphyromonas gingivalis and Treponema dempticola and all the other big words I can throw out there. These pathogens that are very adept at colonizing the human body chronically, that medicine is not very good at eradicating. I mean, like, for instance, like even dentists don't know how to cure gum disease. They can't. Like, they know as soon as gum disease sets in, like, you're done. That's just it. There's nothing they can do for you. They can treat gingivitis and cavities, but they can't cure periodontitis and periodontal disease, because they don't know. Science knows what microorganisms cause it, but they don't know why they're able to like induce chronic colonization. And I do. It has a lot to do with hydrogen sulfide and hydrogen sulfides. And actually, so hydrogen sulfide made by like sulfate reducing bacteria inhibit the immune system. Hydrogen sulfide is a potent reducing agent, so it actually neutralizes the oxidative products of the immune system, thereby disabling those hypohalous acids. And so that's why like smoking cigarettes and other cyanide sources. And there was a lot of misguided people, especially in the 80s, although this is still a problem, thinking that if you took high doses of cyanide, you could treat cancer, but really all that happened was you just poison people with cyanide, because that's not how it works. Like the dietary cyanide in foods like leafy greens and almonds and apple seeds should be more than enough for the immune system to use. It is not a function of excess of quantity. It's a function of consistency and as well as immunocompetence. And taking excess the only thing taking excess does is risk poisoning. Sorry, I clicked off the wrong window. So anyway, so that's why smoking is addictive, because smoking literally just providing a shit ton of cyanide that soaks up all of the hypochlorous acid made by the immune system when you're chronically colonized by pathogens. And that's why also an increase in periodontal disease and metabolic disease accompanies smoking, is because those people already have those fucking pathogens. And smoking is actually therapeutic to that. So if you address that and you address the dietary problems that underlie that, which is a diet low, like industrial diets have almost no cyanide at all in them. You know, cyanide is water soluble as well. So if you say, for instance, boil your broccoli, you're basically just draining out all of the cyanide as well as potassium and other water soluble nutrients. So don't boil your vegetables. But also food processing, like even yucca, for instance, is really high in cyanide. It's actually so high in cyanide that having it all the time can give you an excess. Although that is also really actually like when. So there. My brain is running too. My mouth can't keep up with my brain. It's well known in places like Africa that rely on cassava and yucca. I mean, it's the same thing. Yucca and cassava are the same thing. Can develop symptoms of cyanide poisoning, but that's also a symptom of protein deficiency, because our body uses sulfurous protein amino acids to detoxify cyanide into thiocyanate. Sorry, not I say it wrong again. Thiocyanate, and thiocyanate is safe for our body, whereas cyanide is not. So if you have, and there's also types of lima bean that are so high in cyanide they can be toxic, although none of them are usually bred and distributed in typical in like Western markets. But yucca is high in cyanide. So if you have like fried yucca, which is fucking amazing, it's so delicious. The boiling process by which you prepare it leaches out some cyanide, but not all of it, and you still get a huge healthy dose of it. But making yucca into tapioca flour, which, surprise if you didn't know that, that's where tapioca comes from, is actually from yucca. There's no cyanide in tapioca. It's been processed and boiled, and there's no longer any cyanide in it. So like tapioca is not a replacement for like yucca or other cyanide sources. But anyway, basically like, you know, the epidemic of nicotine addiction isn't at all to do with fucking nicotine. It's because industrial diets are so low in cyanide that many people's only source of cyanide comes from cigarettes. And so if you increase oppositely your diet with cyanide sources like almonds and yucca, or chew on apple seeds when you have an apple, or leafy greens like brassicas like broccoli and kale and Brussels sprouts and all those other fun stuff, then you'll get a constant supply of cyanide in your body. And, you know, and to address this problem again, this is what most people's issues come from. They go like, you know, your brain goes like, oh, I really want to be healthy, so I'm going to take a lot of that. That is not how any of it works. Do not go out and buy amygdalin and poison yourself with cyanide. That's not how it works. It needs to just be consistent, like daily intake of moderate normal dietary sources of cyanide is how that works. And and excess does not work, because if your immune system doesn't work, and if you're colonized by hydrogen sulfide producing microbes, those microbes buffer themselves against the hypothiocyanous acid and hypochlorous acid and hypoiodinous acid with the hydrogen sulfide. So it doesn't fucking matter how much you take, they're still going to be there. They won't get eradicated, because you have to address the hydrogen sulfide, which is going to be addressed more directly in my update, which I'm working on, which is almost done. But just eating healthy in the way that my book prescribes is the start for that. And yeah, so if you just eat like a normal diet with those healthy foods in it, then you stop craving. And so this is also why I didn't become addicted to cigarettes when I tried to be a smoker, because I said this earlier in the stream, and just to clarify, I was testing what nicotine's effects were on my body, because nicotine has other effects. Nicotine inhibits aromatization of testosterone, and that's one of the reasons that, and its high cyanide content is why people who smoke often have an easier time staying lean, is because both the immune promoting properties of the cyanide as well as the aromatase inhibiting nature of, I think it's nicotine that does that directly. And so I was like trying, and like, nicotine can increase your metabolic rate the same way that caffeine does. So it can be used to, but also though, it is absolutely impossible to regrow hair if you smoke cigarettes. Like, just no way. Like, if you're losing hair and you want to keep it, you cannot smoke cigarettes. Like, even just one cigarette will completely stop hair regrowth for like 3 or 4 months. And I'm not joking. Like, this was when I was trying to do this, I was one of the times I noticed cessation in my hair regrowth, like I had achieved, like I talk about in my book, and for quite a few months. It took a good 4 to 5 months for my hair regrowth to start back up again after quitting like smoking altogether, which wasn't a problem because it just didn't bother me. But the reason I didn't get addicted to tobacco when I was smoking was because I had a diet already high in cyanide, from mostly at that time, it was mostly from yucca consumption, actually. But then later I would resolve that obviously eating vegetables is actually net good for you, and then brassicas are also a source of it. But yeah, anyway, so that's the whole thing behind nicotine and cigarettes. And also though, like, addiction issues are not just chemical, they are also psychological, but nobody understands the psychological aspect that is discussed in all of the therapy around my work that you can see around inventory therapy. A lot of us who have addiction issues also lack effective coping skills for life. You are easily stressed out by stressful stimuli. Your life is dissatisfying. You don't feel fulfilled. You feel like you've got to be rich to get happy. You need, relationships, but relationships also bother you because you don't know how to like effectively resolve interpersonal conflict and get what you want for yourself out of a relationship without manipulating other people. Like, when life is really stressful, when you don't have effective self-care skills and coping skills. And trust me, you don't have those. Like, a lot of the reason a lot of us are here is because we have trauma with our body image and our self-worth, and life is very stressful for us. And when life is excessively stressful, like, it's really hard to handle that. So we resort to chemical coping mechanisms like excessive drinking or excessive drug use, including, the less harmful options like smoking pot or cigarettes. And oppositely, teaching yourself self-care skills and skills of empowerment, that feeling of empowerment reverses the release of stress hormones in response to stressful stimuli that occurs otherwise. Say, for instance, like, what's a good example? Maybe interpersonal relationships and self-worth is the number one problem in this issue, where we just fundamentally do not believe that we are okay as we are. and we're constantly afraid of getting in trouble or being rejected or failing. So your mind is just constantly hyper vigilant to all possible ways that misfortune can beset you. And that causes an endocrine environment where your body is constantly releasing adrenaline and cortisol and other stress hormones. And so you're always under stress. And when you teach yourself new mental health skills and self-care skills and coping mechanisms that are actually healthy and effective for you, like I talked like are discussed through my inventory therapy, that there's the video on here and it's in my books, teaching yourself those skills oppositely causes empowerment, which lowers your stress hormones and raises happy hormones like dopamine and oxytocin and all that fun stuff. So like, and I also tell this, and people just, it doesn't matter how long I do this work, people still don't believe me, that addressing your mental health is just as important as addressing your diet, because the brain, you'll remember from earlier in the stream, is the most prominent stimulant for adrenaline release, and adrenaline drains blood sugar and cortisol follows low blood sugar. So like when you are constantly nervous and having anxiety and depression, and don't believe in yourself and are stressed out by surprises in your life, like, you know, suddenly you don't have any money, when that stuff dominates your psyche, it is impossible to fix your physical health, because you have such constant expression of stress hormones, of high adrenaline, high cortisol. It is absolutely impossible to get well when you exist in that kind of an environment. So like taking care of your physical health is also, it also requires taking care of your mental health. And then also, you know, and we do that through like smoking pot or smoking cigarettes or drinking. And so if you're relying on those chemical interventions, invariably it becomes excessive, because you have never addressed the psychological reasons for doing it in the first place. So whenever I'm working with people that have like marijuana addiction issues or alcoholism, it's literally not just about addressing like diet and things like that. It's about teaching yourself new self-care skills. And the only way that you can do that is through like introspective therapy, like inventory therapy guides you through. And the thing is too, is that if you have these issues, like you can do that. Guess what? It's not that hard. Like I did it for myself, and you can do it for yourself too. It really isn't that hard. You just, all you're missing is just the know-how of how to do it. And once you learn the process, it's so easy. Literally just requires a pen and paper. It doesn't even require an attitude change or mindset. Like most of us try to improve our lives and our mental health by basically like we talk to ourselves like we are our own life coach, you know, like, oh, you need to like relax more, or you need to like have a different attitude about this one thing. That it doesn't work, because those kinds of responses to life are a function of the unconscious mind, not the conscious mind. You cannot consciously change your behavior like that. Your unconscious mind has to become aware of it. For most of us, that comes through traumatic experiences, like me when I drove my car into a concrete wall. But it didn't, though, because alcohol actually impairs the neurochemical acetylcholine that imprints learning. So that's why alcoholics persist in alcoholism, is because alcohol literally destroys the neurochemical that would normally facilitate the learning of lessons from unpleasant life experiences. So they don't ever learn, even when alcoholism causes horrible problems like that. You have to do that on your own volition. You need to teach yourself. You need to reach out and get help and ask for help and learn these new skills. And that's what inventory therapy does. Inventory therapy helps walk your brain through the experiences of trauma so that they can be relieved, so that you learn new lessons about life. You learn that, oh, you don't need to be anxious about money anymore. Oh, you don't need to be anxious about your self-worth. You don't need to be anxious about your relationship. Um, Relationship stress was one of the biggest ones for me, where I fundamentally had been raised in an environment that taught me to think I was worthless as a human being. So when I would get into a relationship with somebody, I was always afraid that it was just going to end and that they didn't really like me. So all of my behavior in that relationship would be toward trying to get my partner to demonstrate that they cared for me, especially if I felt insecure that they didn't. But all that does, when you do that, all you're doing is entertaining that trauma. And you don't, and a lot of you know this from your own experience, that you get the exact opposite of what you're trying to achieve. You stress not only yourself out, but you stress out the other people in your life. And so then you can't even enjoy your relationship, even though it's what you want, more than anything else. And then they also get fucking annoyed of you and end up leaving anyway in the end. And so when you teach yourself new skills, I'm not talking about like being able to balance your bank account, right? Or how to talk to people in an argument. I'm literally talking about emotional and mental health skills of like, it's okay if people don't fucking like you. Like that was like the biggest revelation, like through all of my experience, is like I don't have to fucking care what other people think about me. And it's so empowering, but I couldn't give myself that pep talk. I had to go through the trauma that created that mindset in the first place. And that's what we're avoiding when we do things like smoke marijuana a lot or smoke cigarettes all the time or get drunk all the time, is we don't even have the skills to begin to address the trauma that caused those problems in the first place. So if you go through like inventory therapy, that's what you do. It literally, like, you get, instead of like experiencing like the trauma of like your car slamming into a concrete wall or like your partner leaving you, like you can just sit down at your kitchen table with a pad and paper and write about it. It's, trust me, it's a lot easier. And so if you do that, the learning of the skills, the empowerment that occurs from there is what lowers your stress hormones. So the stress, like I gave the anecdote about my Nana using pot toward the end of her life to manage her pain skills, to manage her pain. Part of the reason that she had that pain in the first place was because she had trauma about her appearance as a woman and her value based on her body, and as a sexual object, that caused her to diet, that gave her that pain in the first place. And if instead she had had some kind of skill like this, where she could teach her unconscious mind that she was valuable just for existing, and that she shouldn't and didn't need to base her value as a person on that of other people, i.e. her husband, then she wouldn't have been in that situation in the first place, and she wouldn't have been in the pain that she was then using the marijuana for. And she could instead use it like me every once in a while when I'm like, around a cigarette, and like, yeah, sure, it'd be fun to kick back and have a fun time, right? But like, because the irony of all ironies was that like I stopped smoking pot like 3 years before I got sober from alcohol, because marijuana made me so paranoid because of my high stress hormones. Like my stress got so bad from the abuse that I was causing my body that I couldn't even smoke pot because it would make me so paranoid. And I've since smoked way more pot since getting sober from alcohol than I ever did while I was drinking alcohol, because of the negative effect that paranoia had on me, because of the way that our endocrine systems function in response to those kinds of things. So, it's really profitable for you to take care of both your physical health and your mental health in such a way as to mitigate the effects of stress hormones, which has every bit as much to do with your your experiences of trauma as it does your blood sugar levels. So, yeah. Anyway, that was nicotine and cigarettes. Oh, I kind of wanted to mention, other things that people use. What are those ones out there? There's kratom is one, and they're obviously like cocaine. I mean, we don't use coca leaves here in the U.S., but that's where cocaine comes from. all of these things work in these same channels and these same pathways where they interact with the neurological system and the endocrine system to alter levels of these hormones. And you should always first do it through diet and environment and the resolution of psychological trauma. You can never, I've mentioned this before, actually. I think I talked about this in my stream on the actual stream on addiction, is the show Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia that's on Hulu. Is a really great show, and the host, I can't remember his full name, but Hamilton is in his name. And he's lovely, and the show is really fascinating. But a lot of people's approach to mental health, there's been a lot of like resurgence in excitement around psychedelic research for the resolution of like PTSD and other traumas. They don't work. They might work for a while. They might enhance therapy, but the reason they don't work is because they do not change the fundamental underlying deficiencies that cause the problem in the first place. They're just a Band-Aid. Even if that Band-Aid lasts for like a good year, from like LSD therapy, it just treats the symptoms. They do not treat the cause. So, you have to treat the cause. And now that my work is here, like, the accessing that information is not hard, right? It costs $35 on my book, and there's so many free, most of it's free on my website and from my YouTube streams. So there's no reason to persist with these problems. If you have these issues, take some compassion for yourself and do that work. The inventory therapy is absolutely free. There's a whole instructional video on it. You can sit down and listen, and you can do your own practice. It's so easy, and very empowering. A little note on that. And by the way, okay, so we're nearing completion on this topic. So now, if you're here and you want to ask questions, this is the time to do so. And when we run out of questions is when I will end the stream. So if you want the stream to keep going, write some questions in, and we can talk about anything you want, your health, your mental health, whatever, other people's mental health. Yeah. So, I always find, like, when we deal with mental health issues like this, which by the way too, once I finish my book, I'm gonna start doing a monthly inventory psychological therapy stream for you to come and participate and talk about mental health stuff and inventory practices. So if you want to be participating in that, start doing inventory therapy, and so then when I do those streams, you can take part. And we will not be talking about physical and nutritional health stuff during those streams at all, to stay on topic. When we have mental health issues, when you have low self-esteem, or you have depression, and you have anxiety, trauma, fear, we fundamentally always lack self-confidence and self-esteem. And a convenient replacement for that is self-pity. And a lot of people use self-pity as a weapon. There's a lot of like narcissistic, predatory assholes on the internet and in our lives who like use problems like victimhood and self-pity as a tool to shame others. And this in and of itself is a psychological delusion as well. And I talk about this in the inventory therapy instructional video about the Karpman drama triangle. Stephen Karpman was a psychologist or psychiatrist that developed this model of understanding human trauma. Or, well, he didn't start it. It was actually started by other people, but he refined it and came up with this model that identifies the three, and yes, there's only three different psychological effects, or not effects, personality types that result from experiences of trauma. And literally one of them is the victim mindset, but the other one is also the persecutor mindset, which uses issues encountered by the victim mindset to attack and exploit other people's psychological trauma for their own purposes. And the third one is the helper type that actually gets involved in both sides of that. I'm not talking about self-pity in a demeaning, blaming way. Self-pity is a replacement for self-esteem when none is forthcoming from our environment. So like if you grew up in a home that did not teach you self-esteem and your own self-worth, self-pity is an instinctual, natural replacement for that, in which we find importance, self-importance, and purpose from our negative experiences. And I repeatedly find in inventory practice that very often we continue to use self-pity in doing the practice. And that actually makes it ineffective, because what you're really doing when you do inventory therapy with and while entertaining self-pity is all you're doing is reinforcing self-pity, which is not empowering. And very specifically, there's like a section in the inventory therapy where you identify your role in things that happen to you. And the purpose of it is to also identify not your role in things that happen to you. There's a lot of our parts of our lives that we take responsibility for that we have absolutely no responsibility for. For instance, like if you're really nervous about, well, I know actually, so like a lot of people, almost everybody on the planet thinks that it's your job to make your relationship work. Guess what? It's absolutely fucking not your job to make your relationship work. You don't have that ability. Every relationship is dependent on both parties participating in it. And if the other person sadly does not want to, you really can't do a lot about that. That's why dating is hard and rejection is hard. And a lot of people are so afraid of rejection that they would rather attack the very people they want to be in a relationship with rather than face their own insecurities and sense of impotence in those issues. And but guess what? It just absolutely is not your job to make a relationship work. I say this all the time, and you can put it on a t-shirt. Your only job in life is to show up for opportunities and to do your best. You are not responsible for nor capable of determining ever the outcome of anything. And but we're led to believe the opposite is true when we're young, and that burdens us with incredible and completely inappropriate sense of responsibility. Like if you think that it's your responsibility to prevent your own death growing up, like I did, like growing up in a religious household, that is fucking psychotic. Like you can't do that. Like no human being on earth has ever been able to prevent their own death. That's the entire point. Like you just can't do that. And you don't need to. You really don't need to. It's not your job. Like you don't need to. And also too, I've inserted myself into a lot of health circles just through the nature of this work. So people come to me with the desire to be eternally youthful and to have a six-pack and never be fat, and just Jesus fucking Christ, like you can't do that, and you don't even need to do that. That's not the whole point. Like when you guys come to me because you want to be skinny, what's really going on is you want people to love you. Like being skinny and being rich is often a shortcut for attracting attention, which assuages our fears of a lack of value, And so when you teach yourself the truth about how life works, that your value just comes inherently from your existence, and you don't need to justify it or do anything to prove that to others. And in fact, if you do need to prove that to people, they're toxic and abusive, and you don't need to have a relationship with them either. The sense of empowerment that comes from doing that lowers your adrenaline, and it lowers your cortisol, and it raises your dopamine and your oxytocin, so that you smile more and you enjoy life. And you don't enjoy life because it's going well. You enjoy life even when it is not going well. That's the whole point. That's what skills are. That's what those emotional skills are. You get to actually enjoy life for what it is, not for what you think it needs to be, which is usually informed by your unhelpful experiences of trauma as a child. So anyway, so that's like, yeah. So go smoke pot if you want to. It's totally great. I like it. I love smoking pot. It's fun. But when you have addiction problems and you feel like you need it to survive, it's because of all these other factors that we talked about, like blood sugar and psychological stress, and in the case of tobacco, cyanide in your immune system. So yeah. Anyway, okay. So question, Jorg, polygamy, monogamy. What's your opinion? Oh, yeah. So yeah, that's a really nuanced thing. And speaking of relationship stress, um, excuse me. I think both of them are great, actually. But I think monogamy is more special than polygamy, than polyamory. It's not to say that you shouldn't do polyamory. I've seen people that do have polyamory, and it's fun. And here's the thing, is that like to sometimes people you actually see this in the gay community a lot, because gay people are so traumatized by their childhoods, like growing up in homophobic environments under the threat of violence and rejection causes an extreme amount of psychological trauma. And lots of populations experience that. You don't have to be gay to experience that, but it's more common when you're gay because you're different. And sometimes, and a lot of times, even when families are supportive of their children, you can't protect children from bigotry and problems like that at all, really. So and so when you are traumatized, regardless of your orientation or whatever, it's really hard to exist in a partnership. You spend so much of your life developing survival skills that you don't end up developing. And especially if you grow up in a homophobic home, you're not taught self-care skills at all, regardless of your orientation or gender identity. And so basically your skill set is literally just survival. It's not like it's not like harmony and cooperation. So like with me, for instance, like I was in a really toxic relationship for a long time in which my partner repeatedly cheated on me ever from the very beginning even. And I was somewhat okay with it. Like I didn't need absolute fidelity. I wasn't like, oh my god, like you cheated on me, like we're done for. I was like, I understand why, other people find other people attractive and maybe don't necessarily want to be uh uh constrained by the trappings of monogamy. And it didn't really bother me, if he like hooked up with somebody every once in a while, as long as he was like honest and I was informed and I was the priority in his life. I didn't care. But that's not what happened though. He was extremely also mentally traumatized, addicted to substances, and was just lying to me all the time and having extramarital activities, and especially in ones that were also risky for my own health, which did end up actually inducing really severe health problems for me, because I did not know at the time that I have cystic fibrosis, which impairs my immunity. So I was more susceptible to catching diseases that you get through sexual activity. So it actually did have really serious consequences for my health. And then also because he was narcissistic and paranoid, one of the reasons he left me was because of the health problems that I was having, because I caught them from his infidelity. But anyway, so like, what happens though is a lot of people don't understand that our inability to be satisfied by monogamy is okay, but most people try to make it seem like they need an excuse to not be monogamous, and so will lie or justify like poor behavior, like cheating. My ex loved what's his name? Oh, I can't remember. He's a big like sex columnist. He's really famous. What is he? He operates out of Seattle. I can't remember his name right now. I met him before. He's a lovely person. But he'll often say that God, I've been talking too much about molecules and bacteria. I don't remember people. So he says he often said like do what you have to in a relationship to not go crazy, meaning like he would get questions from people, like for instance like a man would like call in or ask for advice and say, my wife hasn't had sex with me in like a decade, she won't let me touch her, I don't want to be trapped in a sexless marriage for the rest of my life, but I also don't want to break up our family. And that, that is a legitimate Dan Savage. Thank you, word. Yes, Dan Savage. I love him. I don't love his advice, but I love him. uh, he was, that is a legitimate dilemma. You are entitled as an individual to have your sexual desires fulfilled and entertained. You are, but not at the expense of other people. And there's a very big distinction between that. A lot of us don't know how to go about getting what we want without hurting others. So then we don't go about getting what we want, and we inevitably hurt ourselves and others in the process because of a lack of effective coping skills and life skills and interpersonal relationship management skills. Because we just weren't taught these when we were children. Like our parents just didn't possess them, so they weren't able to teach them to us. So a lot of people like, and I say that, obviously I'm gay, so I like, and in the gay community is burdened with an enormous amount of trauma. And so you'll see couples that are like together for a while, like 5 years, 10 years, or maybe even more. And because of our unresolved trauma, are unable to really connect on a very deep spiritual level with our partner. And there's no lonelier place to be than in a relationship when you can't actually connect spiritually to your partner. And a lot of people are like this because of our trauma we have as children and absence of effective interpersonal relationship skills and self-care skills. Don't know how to actually draw near to somebody that we are literally having sex with or sleeping in bed with. So you lay in bed feeling it's far more lonely to lay in a bed with somebody that you don't connect with than it is to be in a bed by yourself. And so people will exist in that situation and for years. And heterosexual couples that share children, this is an even bigger problem because you share children. People often stay together much longer than they would have otherwise if they were single, and so the problem gets even worse. Whereas like gay people, like because we can't directly reproduce, we have much less occurrence of parenthood. so you can just leave like if it gets really bad. But if you have children, that's a whole different level of commitment and responsibility that makes it more difficult to do that. So people will then sort of, because we don't have like direct self-care and interpersonal relationship skills, will go in about it indirectly, creating excuses to depart from that arrangement. And so like, so Dan Savage's advice was like, to just do what you have to not go crazy. Well, like my ex and I, we had sex every single day. Like we had a great sex life, and we had sex all the time. I mean, there was probably not more than like 3 or 4 days in the entire 4 years that we were together that we did not get off every single day. Like sometimes even more than once a day. My ex, like I talk about sex addiction, and it's not an addiction. It's literally part of our biological response to stress and nitric oxide. He suffered from that, and a lot of my a lot of the writing that I do in my work around that kind of an issue was from observing him and his behavior, and it drove him insane. And he, having this like really overactive, compulsive sex response, took Dan Savage's advice to excuse his infidelity in our relationship, even though we were always having sex, because it was to a point that it was really destructive and obsessive. And doing things like, well, I won't get into too much detail, but like doing activities and things that were like really, really harmful and dangerous and wrong, because they put my life in jeopardy. And that's not what Dan meant really, but he used that excuse. But I see this all the time. Like I often see polyamory. There's nothing wrong with polyamory, but I often see people using it as an escape from the inability to connect emotionally with other people. There was this great couple that I knew a while ago. Both of them were very, very handsome, and they dated first. They met first when they were both really young, and they're both older than me. So, but they met when they were like in their 20s, and then one of them moved away to New York, and they reconnected again later, and started dating, and actually got into a long-term relationship, and they were dating for like, oh, good, like 5, 6, 7 years, and they just looked like the happiest couple, and they were like, they always had fun together, and they were both so hot. I mean, they were having like incredible sex. And then, but then all of a sudden, um like, what, deep into their relationship, they invited a third person into it, and I was like, oh, here we go. Yep, this is the end. and like, again, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but the reason that they did it was because of their unresolved trauma, just like me and my ex, and so many other people in the world, were unable to bridge the gulf that is created by unresolved trauma. And when you exist in a relationship like that for years and years and years, it becomes so lonely, even though you have a partner, because you are never, the presence of the other person exaggerates and intensifies the loneliness from the inability to actually connect to other people. So then the only way out of it, people try to use all the tools at our disposal, which are unfortunately very often also, self-delusion and manipulation and things like that. And my ex would complain about a lot of things about me in our relationship, which was really just him trying to justify the fact that his needs were not being met, instead of just saying like, oh, this isn't working out, I think we need to break up. I'm sorry. He persisted in the relationship because he did not want to be viewed as a bad guy, in the process harming me and him, and not meeting either of our needs, right? Like that this is one of the biggest problems in relationship issues, is that people, we often don't want to hurt the other person, but we just end up doing that anyway, because we don't do what we need to do, which is like, just to break up with them, right? Because like they're not right for us, or we're not getting our needs met. But also sometimes we think that our needs aren't being met when they actually are, because they're also informed by our trauma, or there's other issues, happening. Like, my ex, like, instead of addressing his sexual compulsion, was entertaining it. Like, that's not okay. Like, that's not what you're supposed to do either. And that certainly doesn't take care of it. But at the same time, you also don't need to be in a relationship. If you do, suffer from sex compulsion, there's nothing wrong with going out and being slutty and having sex all the time. Just don't lie to other people and drag them along with you, right? You can just be single and have fun. So that's the thing with polygamy and monogamy, is that it's not really about either or. It's that usually both are motivated by experiences of trauma and our biases and perceptions about ourselves and the world around us, that then cause us to act in ways which are counter to our actual well-being. So monogamy can be that too, and it very often is that too. When people feel like they need to be married or need to be monogamous, they do that, but they don't actually want to be. So then they end up being miserable, and then they blame the person that they've lured into the relationship with them, for their misery, when in fact it's your own fucking unresolved trauma that's the problem. But of course, most of us don't have the tools to fix those things. So we just end up persisting in our dysfunction indefinitely. And I was just lucky to be able to stumble onto these tools through my own personal experience, and then developed them further, to share with people. And so, yeah, the same thing is like, there's nothing wrong with polyamory. Like, if you just want to be single but have a bunch of people that you have sex with and are close to, that's fun too. Actually, like, so I have a burner troll account that I like sometimes use on online, and I was like having it out with some Mormons that like were saying hateful things about gay people, and Mormons are really big into monogamy, even though all of them are watching porn and sleeping around on each other because they're miserable and they don't know how to actually, I mean, I don't literally mean all, I'm being hyperbolic, but a lot of them are. And I grew up in a community that was riddled with infidelity, and they don't get divorced because they believe it's bad, but that doesn't mean any of them are good people. Like, Jesus Christ, like, some of the worst people I've ever met in my entire life were Mormon. So like but the thing is like you can meet your own needs. Like you can get what you need out of life and from other people, and you also don't have to hurt other people or manipulate them to get that in the first place. All we do, we just lack the skills, we just lack the know-how and the knowledge of how to actually do that. And that's what like the inventory therapy does. When you do inventory therapy, you are able to communicate with your unconscious mind about the ineffective ways in which you manage your life normally, and that instinctually leads to the shedding of those behaviors, and gives you new options excuse me, to try out in your life. So yeah, so like but I think monogamy ultimately is the most potent type of emotional relationship to be in, because just inherently when you're like in multiple relationships, you distribute your time and attention and energy between more than one person, and it actually takes a lot of emotional vulnerability to be in a relationship with just one person. But the problem is that most people are afraid of emotional intimacy. Like this one Mormon woman yelled at me online that virgins were the most emotionally vulnerable people in the world, and I was like, what? That's not even you. Like you just, yeah, you clearly do not know what emotional vulnerability is. Like emotional vulnerability is not being a naive young person who's never had sex before. That's just naivety. That's not emotional vulnerability. Emotional vulnerability is knowing the risks and yet not trying to manipulate other people, and engineering um things to be the way that you think they should be. So when like the thing what a lot of people don't realize in relationships, and if you're in a relationship and you have relationship issues, this is one of the most important things that you need to understand, is that there is nothing keeping you together other than your both of your continued decision to spend time with each other every single day. When What I didn't understand when I was younger was that when guys wanted to date me, they were demonstrating every single moment that they were with me that they wanted to be with me. But because I was so traumatized by my experience growing up and taught that I needed to be suspicious of people, I never understood that. And conversely, that knowledge would have also helped me to choose better partners instead of being susceptible to ones that were charismatic and used flattery as a tool. I tell people this all the time, and I'm not even joking when I say it. When my future partner, when I'm done with my research, I do not ever want to hear them tell me they love me. Like it was used so cheaply throughout most of my relationships by traumatized people who didn't mean it. It doesn't mean anything to me. Um, I don't ever care to hear that. Uh, Somebody literally just choosing to be part of your life is a demonstration of love, and you don't need it to be more than that. It's nice if they do, they give you presents and treat you nice and rub your back and things like that. But like, um, um, it's the inability to handle life like that that prevents people from having fulfilling romantic relationships. So oppositely, if you resolve that trauma, then you can achieve that. And you can even provide those things for yourself. It's one of the reasons why I'm single right now, and I've been able to be single throughout these many years of doing my research, is that I'm now able to give myself all of the things that I thought I needed from a relationship and from other people. It would be nice to have other people in my life. I long for it a lot, but I'm not lonely and I'm not unfulfilled. Um, and that's not because I had a fucking attitude change. I didn't listen to all those fucking accounts on Instagram where people tell you to change your attitude. That's not how you do this. You change those things by practicing compassion for yourself and resolving your experiences of trauma. That's it. That's all you do, and that's what you need to do. So yeah. And anyway, oh, and your other question, what the point of living? Those questions too. I mean, York, that is like a major inventory entry. What you're talking about here is a fear of the unknown, and a fear of dying, and a fear of the afterlife, and a fear, maybe a fear of God and of punishment and of, death. I mean, I already said death, but with the capital D. Um, I have those questions too. A lot of those questions are what drove a lot of my search for meaning when I was younger, and that I never found. Not in Mormonism, not in any religion, not even in yoga and meditation and smoking pot. Not in therapy. Certainly not in therapy. Um, uh, a lot of fundamentally every fear that we have as a human being can be winnowed down to a fear of the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. We just, more than anything, we want to know. We want to know what happens after we die. We want to know what happens if our partner breaks up with us. We want to know what happens if we don't have any money, or if we do get a lot of money. And we can't know any of that. It's just impossible for us as a human being to ever know what's going to happen in the future. And being okay with that fact is where the solution lies. It's not that, the solution is not in finding those answers. The solution is being okay with the fact that we don't have those answers. And from my experience going through what I did, how my life has been, all the near death experiences I've had, and the disease and the loss and the heartache and the recovery and the therapy that I've done for myself. The point of living is literally just that, is to live. It's the experiences that we have while we are alive that are the very point of it. I was coaching somebody recently who lost their grandmother that they were very close with, and they were understandably very traumatized by losing her. But one of the things I think they had lost sight of was the fact that there is no force in the universe that could ever take away the fact that she existed and that he had those experiences with her. There just isn't. Like, you can't lose that. Like, you cannot change, just as we cannot control the future, we also don't control the past. Just literally just existing is the fundamental point of the entire universe. And there's nothing that you can do to change that. The fact that you have existed will always be a thing. When I was talking actually to one of my sisters a while ago that she asked me the question of like where specialness comes from, like what makes me more special than another person on the other side of the world. And nowadays too, that's like a really pertinent question. There's like nearly 8 billion people on the planet. Like, how are you special when there's like 8 billion others of us? I mean, that number, like, we can't even fathom how much that is. That number is not really within powers of human comprehension, and there are that many other humans on the planet. But of all the people that are on the planet, none of them, except for the several in my family, have me as a brother or have my sister as a sister. They just don't. There's 8 billion people on the planet, and no one else has my mom or, my dog that I had. Like, no one else had him. Like, and it's our experiences where uniqueness comes and specialness comes and value comes and purpose comes from. Is literally, like, the whole point of living is literally just the experience of it and those experiences that are contained within it. And that's also too, conversely, why life has such horrible things in it too. Like right now there is the Israeli Hamas war going on and the obliteration of the Palestinians. It's really horrible. It's really, really horrible. It's one of the worst. These kinds of things are the absolute worst things that can happen to humanity. And like, if God did not stop the Holocaust, he's not going to also stop this either, or any other bad thing that's ever going to happen to people. Bad things happen because we have to, in order to have the full experience in life, we have to also experience the bad and the good together. And that's kind of a cliche saying in and of itself. But in reality, like we literally would not know what happiness means if we did not also know what misery meant. We wouldn't know what happiness means if we don't know what loss and pain are. And we have to experience the full gamut of those things in order to have experienced life. So that's why those things happen, and that's part of why life is literally just about the experience. Literally, the experience of living is what the point of life is. It's not a test. It's not and this is also why too, like I mentioned in my book, that a lot of people who are, you know, religious and searching and stuff like that don't understand is that it's not, you don't need heaven and hell in the afterlife to understand life. Like, people who are living right now are in hell, and people who are living right now are in heaven. I mean, my life has been heaven for the last several years, and I don't have anything. I don't have relationships. I live in a 1-room apartment. And I don't mean 1 bedroom. I mean, I'm literally live in a studio. Like, I'm not even able to have a garden like I would like or anything like that. And yet my life has been more fulfilling than it ever has been. And it's certainly more fulfilling than a lot of my siblings' lives are, because they are so burdened by trauma and control mechanisms. And like, and that's what people don't like. A lot of people's fixation on life is like, oh, I'll be happy if or when, you know, I need a certain amount of money to be happy. That doesn't happen. You look around, you see all these fucking rich people that are the most miserable people on the planet. It has nothing to do with that kind of stuff. It has everything to do with experience, and you can facilitate those experiences for yourself if you do inventory therapy. That's the whole point of it. So yeah. Anyway, AI. Yeah, we should wrap up. We've been streaming for a long time, and I haven't gotten any other questions. But I'll finish yours, Jorg, and then we'll be done. AI is stupid. I mean, the AI that's out now isn't even AI. It's just machine learning. And yes, they're very different. I was just watching this video on YouTube of a guy that I like, Mossbag, who does like Hollow Knight stuff. He was highlighting how, like, this wiki hosting company that's kind of predatory integrated AI into the wiki, and the AI was adding entries into the wiki that were completely fake. Like, the AI said that there were like characters in the game that aren't even part of the game, and or objects or lore part of the game that weren't ever part of the game. It was just literally making up things that sounded like they fit in, and that's all that the current AI is. Oh, excuse me. I've been talking too long now. Obviously, AI will eventually become really advanced, but like, I just don't. It will have effects, but I think that what will happen when the more AI occurs, and we as humans become less reliant on humans for labor and industry and commerce and all those kinds of things, that we will just choose to do labor and those kinds of things for the sake of it. You know, like, we'll have our own gardens and grow food ourselves just because, like, that's, you know, that's the point of being a human being. You know, we won't ever have to do it again, but we do it because that's what brings us fulfillment. I mean, I cannot emphasize to any of you who have never done gardening before, that I, to this day, am shocked by how fulfilling the act of gardening was. And the reason is because it is built into our biology. Like, our function as a human being evolved such that organizing our environment to take care of our own needs is literally built into our how we operate biologically. So, like, when you go out into the yard and you plant tomatoes and you watch them grow and you harvest those tomatoes, you know, like, and you can do that on your own patio. Like, if you can put pots out in the sun and grow, you know, herbs and tomatoes and things like that. The act of doing that fulfills. It's not because we need to eat, although we do. It's because doing that is what we are as human beings. A lot of people don't understand that, like, We are literally a primate species that makes harmonic vocalizations at will with our voice. There are almost no animals in the entire world that can sing, and we are one of those few that does. And that singing isn't just something we do, it's literally part of our biology to do that. And we have evolved to be able to do that. And when you sing, one of the reasons it's so wonderful is because that's what we do as a human being. And, AI can never take that away from you. And it can never take away, your fulfillment from being in a relationship with another human being and having children, or, learning, yourself. Like, AI can never take away any of those things. So AI is just dumb. It's like, whatever. I mean, it's kind of cool, but it's also dumb. Like, there's this big fear. Hi Gregory. There's this big fear, among a lot of creators that AI will take away jobs like that, and it will. People will, greedy, predatory people will take away jobs using AI, but we will still do those things because they give us satisfaction. Like, an AI doing art doesn't mean you can't do art, and yours will be better anyway because it's, organic and originates from an actual animal and not a machine. So yeah, I don't think there's anything to fear about AI at all. It'll cause problems, but no more than any other technological advancement or disruption. I mean, you're like the same people who still run around today, like claiming that there's witches and magic and Satan worshipers. I mean, there are Satan worshipers, but they're mostly doing it ironically. But like, that it has any real inherent value, are literally also holding a tiny phone that has a screen on which they can call or text or see anyone around the world at any time. Like, they literally are holding magic in their own hand while screaming that magic is evil and exists elsewhere in the world. Like, it's just so, like, human beings can be so fucking stupid. Like, if a same psychotic religious person today went back in time with their phone to the people that they think they would get along with, they would be burned at the stake for being a witch. And yet they're literally holding that phone as if it's not like a manifestation of like what humans can achieve, right? So like, yeah, you don't have to worry about AI. It's and if you do an inventory therapy on it, because it's mostly irrational. It'll cause problems, but nothing that will take away from our humanity. Jorg said the desire to want to be in a relationship is permanently a sign of good health. Yeah, Ray's kind of right about that. Like, when you have neurological stress and unresolved trauma, the presence of others is unnerving and unsettling. And because in response to trauma we develop coping and control mechanisms. Those coping and control mechanisms are literally antithetical to what a relationship is. So though it's not just about like, because when you are possessed of effective life skills and self-care skills, that lowers your endocrine stress. Eating well and taking care of your body also does that too. So that's why you have to address health holistically in all aspects of these factors that control these things in order to be satisfied by those things. So like, because that was the thing, like, I was never going to be satisfied in a relationship. Because my life was dominated by so many destructive control and coping mechanisms that were a result of the trauma that I had as a child that motivated me to diet, to starve my body, to work out excessively, to take potentially dangerous supplements, to try to control my partners that I was with, to make me feel safe in the relationship. And so like, I was never like, I kept thinking that like, oh, one day I'll meet the right person. Like, I was never going to meet the right person. That was never going to happen. Like, what I needed to do was, which I thankfully ended up being able to do, was to learn, actually for the first time in my life, in spite of my many therapists and therapy sessions that I tried to engage in, was actually learn how to resolve the trauma that I had been through. And then that resolved all of my destructive behaviors that prevented me from achieving those things. So yeah. Actually, Greg, like on that, Gregory, on that same note, like someone else I was talking to that knows Ray Pete stuff was pointed out that like, Ray talks about how like healthy people are more contented because, and literally the mechanism behind it is because you don't have high stress hormones. Like the high stress hormones are what motivate, and people too, like, and there's a stream on here about ADHD where I talk about how like if you are restless and you have ADHD and you have like attention problems, like that is literally a function of what stress hormones do. Stress hormones motivate you as an animal to get up and go do other shit. That's their job, because stress as an evolutionary human being is usually from an absence of sufficient resources. So getting up and going and exploring and having new experiences facilitates finding and acquiring new resources. So like that's why like little kids that can't sit still, you know, in school, like their bodies are functioning exactly as they are meant to when they encounter physiological stress. And usually in those cases, it's because kids aren't being fed enough fruit and sugar, actually. And also, and sugar, like candy is not you got fruit first and then also use other sugar sources. But like they don't have enough sugar storage in their body. So they exhibit higher stress hormones, and that motivates restlessness, and then they're shaking and they can't pay attention. And that, you know, the same thing happens when you're an adult. But also like light deficiency, emotional trauma, you know, unstable homes, abusive parents, excessively, you know, overbearing parents, like all those factors, like, you know, factor into it. So yeah, so same thing, yeah, like being in a relationship like is facilitated by taking care of your body. And that doesn't mean like going to the gym and getting a six-pack. That means like eating fruit every single day, eating enough carotene, eating enough vitamin K, eating enough protein, getting enough sunshine. So yeah, taking care of your endocrine health is like the key for that. So anyway, all right. Hey, thank you everybody for coming by. This was actually really fun. I hope that was helpful. Smoke pot all you want, except if you're dependent on it, then address those reasons. You don't need to be in that situation, you know. Take care of yourself. It's actually really easy to do with all these tools that I have now to share with you. So do that. If you are not subscribed to my channel, please do so. That helps improve the distribution. Like and subscribe. Like if you like the video and you comment on it, that actually that boosts. Thanks, York. You're welcome. So that boosts distribution of my content. So people, but most people don't want to watch my stuff unless they already know what I'm talking about because it's science. but it does help, and I appreciate all of your guys' support. I'm on Threads and Instagram now too, so if you can follow me on those links. I mean, instead of the other site that is so annoying and destructive. If you want to follow me on those social media sites, buying a book supports my work, or you can support my work at Patreon in the link below as well. Happy Halloween again to everybody that has this holiday, and I hope you have a good, fun night tonight and are safe and enjoy yourselves and have a good week, and I will see you in the future sometime. Bye.